Chapter 2 The Spider's Web. In the capital of the Golden Bomb Dynasty's galactic empire, on the hopped planet Odin, the most magnificent structure was, of course, the Imperial Palace, Nui Sansuchi, the residence of the imperial family. In one corner of the palace, which was composed of countless buildings and gardens, was the residence of the Marquess von Benemunde, Susanna, a woman who had once held the exclusive favor of Kaiser Frederick IV. In the past, the Kaiser would depart from her mansion to attend meetings and audiences, but now his steps were only directed towards the mansion of Countess Anna Rose von Grunewald. In a salon lit by candlelight and furnished in a classical style, there was a male guest. He was not a lover. He was just a servant to the Marquis, a member of the Kaiser's medical team, Dr. Glacier. In the dim light, the Marquess von Benemunde waved her once pale hand, the same hand that had once been held by the Kaiser. At that very moment, an uninvited celebration was taking place elsewhere, with Reinhard and others toasting their triumphant return. "I thought it would be disadvantageous to leave that woman's brother alive, and I've tried many times to eliminate the threat behind me," she said. That woman referred to Anna Rose, Reinhard's sister. It was a confession of her plans for murder, but the doctor did not point this out. He merely recorded it silently in the library of his memory. "And yet, in that time, that annoying child has not only survived, but has grown, and now he's risen to be called Excellency." The energy of her hatred wove fine threads throughout the room, and the court physician shrank his thin body as if bound by them. Although he was accustomed to her emotional outbursts, he knew he would never find pleasure in them. "A vice admiral at less than 20 years old. This is the utmost disgrace to the authority of the imperial military, and they dare to call that boy Excellency. Excellency!" "I've heard he is about to be promoted to admiral." The doctor's tone was cautious, but since the Marquess was immersed in her passion, only he knew the hint of malice hidden in his words. As someone constantly subjected to a flood of overwhelming and violent negative emotions, such small acts of spite were essential for his mental health. Dr. Glacier's sympathy for the Marquess was not due to shared feelings, but out of respect for her still formidable power, which, though diminished, was not completely lost, and for her wealth, which showed no sign of waning. The Marquess continued grinding her teeth. "It's already insufferable that woman is now Countess Grunewald, and now her brother is about to inherit the Lohengram name, a prestigious title of Count." This was not yet publicly announced, but the Marquess had long heard the news, as the court was rife with networks of information manipulated through money and influence. The Lohengrin family was, of course, a noble lineage dating back to Kaiser Rudolph the Great, having produced more than 10 ministers and admirals. The ninth Count Lohengrin, Conrad Heinz, was one of the three admirals who supported the court revolution of Kaiser Erich II in the imperial year 253, defeating the tyrant Kaiser August II in the Travail Star Zone. After Eric's ascension, Conrad was promoted to imperial marshal and held various positions as Minister of War, Minister of Internal Affairs, and Minister of State. Although the title briefly rose to that of Marquis, it reverted to Count after the death of Princess Magdalena in an accident caused by Conrad's second son, Philip. The family's line was often cut short by the early deaths of its heirs, leading to its eventual extinction. Reinhard was now set to inherit this house by the will of Kaiser Frederick IV. Following his sister, Reinhard, too, would rise to the rank of count. Nobles who had hoped to see their own sons or brothers inherit this famous family title were enraged. Yet, mindful of the Kaiser's favoritism toward Anna Rose, they dared not openly voice opposition. Some of the more cunning nobles even attempted to introduce their daughters or sisters to Reinhard, hoping to indirectly seize control of the Lohengrin estate. Many noble ladies have tried to woo the golden-haired brat, but I've heard he has politely rejected every one of them. How disgraceful! The words of contempt that spilled from the Marquess's lips were so tangible that had any of those noblewomen been present, they would have felt physically struck and left bleeding from the face. Is there no way to get rid of that arrogant brat in a fitting manner, Glacier? I understand your feelings, but the golden-haired boy is no longer an unknown officer. He is now an admiral of the imperial military, and will soon inherit the title of Count Lohengrin. Any untimely death would certainly draw the attention of both the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Ceremonial Affairs. The Ministry of Ceremonial Affairs handled various administrative duties concerning the nobility, including civil litigation between nobles, inheritance issues, the management of schools for noble children, and the awarding of titles. They were also responsible for overseeing the restoration of the Lohengrin family title. However, their powers often overlapped with those of the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Finance, rendering them largely ceremonial. The position of the Minister of Ceremonial Affairs was more symbolic, as a figurehead of noble society rather than a true politician. Those so-called rebels of the Free Planets Alliance are utterly useless as well. How can they not even kill one golden-haired boy on the battlefield? Dr. Glacier couldn't help but smile wryly at this misdirected outburst aimed at the Free Planets Alliance. The rebels are indeed disappointing, but fortunately, The Countess of Grunewald shows no signs of pregnancy. Oh, Dr. Glacé couldn't help but smile wryly at this misdirected outburst aimed at the Free Planets Alliance. The rebels are indeed disappointing, but fortunately, the Countess of Grunewald shows no signs of pregnancy. She will never bear a child! The speed and ferocity with which she responded even startled Dr. Glacier for a moment. He cautiously watched the Marquess, who now sat motionless like a sculpture titled Hatred. Her white skin seemed ready to crack, and if it did, the boiling hatred inside her would surely scald the doctor. I will never allow such a low-born woman to be called the mother of the nation. The Musil family is technically part of the nobility as well, though they don't hold any titles. They have long held the rank of imperial knights, so she is neither a commoner nor a peasant. She was practically a commoner. Yes, that is indeed true. In any case, I cannot allow that low-born woman to rise any further. She must be put in her place. And how do you plan to do that? A malicious light danced in the Marquess's eyes. If that woman becomes pregnant, and the child in her womb is not the Kaiser's, not only would she lose the Kaiser's favor, but it would also be an unforgivable crime as a member of the imperial harem. She and her brother would be sentenced to death, and they would receive the severe punishment they deserve for their arrogance. That would certainly be the case. By this point, Dr. Glaser no longer bothered to hide his look of disgust. Whether male or female, the intensity of jealousy between people of the same gender often far exceeded what the opposite gender could imagine. In any case, the Marquess of Benemunde's malice was not something that could elicit sympathy from others. But how do you intend to make the Countess Grunewald commit such an indiscretion? Who would be the man involved? What is needed is not a man. It is the seed. Once more, the physician abruptly halted his breathing apparatus. It would be sufficient to save the seed of a man and use your position to facilitate fertilization. Collect suitable samples as a reward, and gather the semen of appropriate men. Understood. I will collect the semen as requested. If you have any specifications for the type of man whose semen you need, please let me know. The lady's eyes gleamed with a greasy sheen. Of course, it should be from someone of low status, with low intelligence, no education, an appearance as hideous as an ape, a cruel and brutish nature, prone to drunkenness. Ah, what else? Yes, the higher the chance of producing a deformity, the better. Oh, and yes, it would be perfect if the man had a sexually transmitted disease and could infect that woman. The physician wiped away the sweat that had not even beaded on his forehead, skillfully masking his sighs. Such a man, such a man would be rare even in vast Odin. To ensure perfection, could I request some time and, above all, expenses to find the best material? Cost is no object. The physician thought that this was the only redeeming quality of the woman. But of course, he kept this to himself for self-preservation, and bowed respectfully. He planned to add about 50% to the costs, intending to make it easier to manage the lady's excessively heavy purse. However, it is with all due respect, but if the Countess of Grunewald falls from grace, His Majesty might become interested in a new woman. This point is beyond my control. I hope you will forgive me in advance. What the physician truly wanted to say was that, even if Anna Rose fell, it was unlikely that the Kaiser's favor would return to Marquess von Benemunde, and that it would be impossible for her to gain complete power unless she bore an heir. However, he was not obligated to speak so directly. The most sensitive nerve of the Marquess was only stirred by anger and malice. Even so, the physician was struck by the change in people. He could not help but feel a sense of reflection. 15 years ago, when Susanna von Benemunde, the daughter of a Viscount family, was brought into Kaiser Frederick IV's harem, she was a delicate young lady, likened to a newly blossomed primrose. He had felt pity for her, imagining her shivering and trembling like a winter bird in the Kaiser's bedchamber. Yet, over the days of pregnancy, the conferral of a marquisate, stillbirths, and multiple miscarriages, she had passed 30 years of age. Though her appearance retained some freshness, she had lost her former charm, and the Kaiser's favor had been monopolized by Countess of Grunewald Anna Rose. The once delicate bird had become a predator, its beak and claws honed to tear apart other birds that had been driven from warm nests into the harsh wilderness. The physician was a creature of the court. To live completely, one must precisely determine the direction of the stronger wind. If it was confirmed that Marquess von Benemunde could eventually monopolize the Kaiser's favor and power within the court, he would pledge absolute loyalty. But since this was not certain, multiple layers of insurance were necessary. If the grim conspiracy against Countess of Grunewald were exposed, and Marquess von Benemunde faced death or prior suffering, it would be her own doing. However, the physician must avoid being executed as an accomplice. Approaching Countess Anna Rose von Grunewald herself would be quite difficult, but there might be a way through her brother, Reinhard, the future Count of Lohengrin. While pretending to bow to the current object of his loyalty, the physician continued to ponder his strategies. At that time, Kaiser Frederick IV of the Galactic Empire was the 36th of the Golden Bomb dynasty. His 30-year reign was 2.5 times the average length of reign for previous Kaisers. Since ascending to the throne at the age of 29, this man had neither notable political achievements nor significant misdeeds. Instead, he had slowly consumed time, his own vitality, and the fate of the dynasty. The century-and-a-half-long conflict with the Free Planets Alliance appeared as a never-ending circular movement, while court intrigues and regional rebellions had become annual events. Both the court and the government were dominated by lethargy and formality, with goodwill and malice alike simmering in a lukewarm state rather than boiling over. Ordinary, lazy, ceremonial, exhausted, stagnant. This is how later historians describe the era of Frederick IV's reign. Giant Kaiser Rudolph the Great had usurped the democratic-republican government of the Galactic Federation and established a despotic state under the divine rule of the Kaiser, a regime that had been in place for nearly 5 centuries. The stakes of despotism driven into the corpse of republicanism were now corroded. The floor was tilting, and the pillars were wobbling. Frederick IV did not seem to make any effort to protect the dynasty from the erosion of time. From the moment he ascended, he was regarded as an ordinary monarch. He had an older brother and a younger brother. His older brother, Richard, was enlightened but diligent and cultured, while his younger brother, Clement, was active and vivacious. Lacking support from the courtiers, Frederick sank into obscurity. His brothers, Richard and Clement, were engaged in a power struggle for the supreme position. More accurately, the factions of courtiers surrounding them fought over the privileges of the new era, and the two princes were caught up in this conflict. In the imperial year 452, Crown Prince Richard was accused of attempting to assassinate Kaiser Ottofried V and was executed. The 60 courtiers surrounding him were also executed, and Clement was appointed as the new crown prince. By 455, when the innocence of the late Duke Richard was proven, and it became clear that Clement's faction had framed him, 170 courtiers of Clement's faction were purged. Clement attempted to flee to the Free Planets Alliance, but was killed in a freak accident along with his spaceship. Thus, when the Kaiser lay on his deathbed from heart disease, Frederick was the only one at his side, having neither attracted expectations nor become the target of hatred from anyone. Since Kaiser Ottofried V was extremely frugal with money, Prince Frederick always struggled with funding his pleasures. Just before the death of his father, he was pressed to settle a debt of 540,000 imperial marks from high-end courtesans and taverns. In earlier times, it might have been possible to sell titles such as Imperial Knight, but now such assets had no value. The prince had to grovel and beg even the owner of a store named Bouguer. Feeling somewhat awkward at seeing the prince, who should have held a high status, grovel, the owner of Bouguer agreed to cancel the debt in exchange for a promissory note stating that if Frederick ever ascended to the throne, he would repay the debt at 20 times its face value. Although it was thought to have wasted 22,000 marks, the if became reality. When the new Kaiser took the supreme crown, he paid the store owner 440,000 marks. The money that Kaiser Ottofried V had accumulated, not out of a sense of responsibility, but for personal pleasure, was enough to offset the deficit in the national treasury that had persisted for several generations. However, Frederick IV began to squander it in a manner akin to revenge, nullifying his father's efforts with numerous constructions and public works. Despite this, he did not drive the treasury or himself to ruin, and adorned his wife, whom he had married during his time as a prince, as Kaiserin, while immersing himself in pleasures he had previously avoided. From the start, he had no interest in state affairs. Even this was relatively mundane compared to some of his ancestors. His great-grandfather, Ottofried IV, collected over 10,000 beautiful women in his harem, did not engage in politics, hunting, or feasting, and devoted himself solely to pleasure. He died suddenly in the harem's bed 5 years later, though 5,000 of them were still waiting to receive the Kaiser's favor as virgins. He fathered 624 illegitimate children, of which 388 reached adulthood, and most of the prominent nobility were saddled with having to marry or betroth their children to the Kaiser's offspring, paying large sums in bride prices and dowries. During the wars against the Free Planets Alliance, Count Edmund von Sonnenfels, who had been promoted to marshal due to his military achievements, was unfortunate in marriage. His wives died 3 times, and each time his new wives were daughters of Ottofried IV. When he died in his 40s, his friend Admiral Brooke commented that he died having had all his talents, wealth, and energy drained by the Kaiser, which led to his expulsion from the military due to scandal. Even so, Frederick IV's indulgences involved a large number of women, certainly over 1,000, including one-night wives. His tastes changed dramatically over time. In the earlier period, he preferred mature, voluptuous women and did not hesitate to pursue married women. It is said that a certain baron named Eisenels, who had no military achievements but was elevated to count and given the position of chamberlain, did so by providing his wife to the Kaiser for a year. At the time, among the noble society, the trend was for slim women to seek moderate obesity by gorging on fresh cream and cakes, and it even became fashionable to buy and adopt voluptuous daughters from commoners, which earned ridicule from some nobles and the majority of commoners. By the time he reached his mid-40s, Kaiser Frederick IV suddenly lost interest in voluptuous women and began seeking teenage girls. The first girl to capture his exclusive favor was awarded the title of Marquess of Benemunde, but she was not his ultimate goal. After exhausting numerous women from the court and noble society, the Kaiser sought pure, innocent young girls from the streets. Officials from the imperial court, responding to the Kaiser's wishes, began searching for demure and beautiful girls in their mid-teens. Even when they succeeded after much effort and expense, many were soon discarded, having to the search for new flowers. At one point, the Minister of War lamented in a cabinet meeting about the shortage of troops on the front lines and criticized the imperial court for having excessive staff. The minister of the imperial court was said to have responded with either indignation or, conversely, resignation. Our staff also stand on the battlefield. While they are not exposed to bullets or beams, they are clearly soldiers, he retorted. After the death of Crown Prince Ludwig, the pretext of needing a male heir arose, and the imperial court staff literally ran around their workplaces. Thus, in the year 477 of the imperial calendar, an official from the imperial court discovered a 15-year-old girl named Anna-Rose von Musel in a back alley. Her golden hair, sapphire eyes, and porcelain skin, combined with an astonishing transparency and purity despite her modest clothing, made a strong impression. Her mother was deceased, and her father, Sebastian, was a low-ranking noble with the title of imperial knight. Lacking both the means and the desire to support himself, he had failed in his ventures and drowned his sorrows in alcohol. When offered 500,000 marks as preparation money, he had no hesitation in selling his daughter to the harem. Inside the land car taking her away, the girl maintained a doll-like expression, but as the palace approached, she asked if her 10-year-old brother's future could be assured. When the court official replied that it depended on her service to His Majesty, the girl nodded and fell silent once more. Thus, Anna-Rose became a member of the harem. In the court, her only friends were Viscountess Dorothea von Schaffhausen and Baroness Magdalena von Westphalen, as well as the Corwitz couple, who were imperial knights. The husband, who had discovered Anna-Rose and brought her to the harem, was awarded a large monetary reward by the Kaiser for his service, and was instructed to serve Anna-Rose, working as a butler for the Grunewald household. Corwitz often recounted to his wife the scene when he first discovered Anna-Rose. It was the time when twilight began to invade the atmosphere, and a blonde girl in a blue dress and a clean white apron called out to her younger brother and his friends playing in the backyard. "Reinhardt, it's time for dinner. Sieg, if you'd like, you can come eat too. Don't hesitate. It's more fun with more people." Her younger brother is now Admiral Reinhard von Musel of the Imperial Army. Yep. Anna-Rose does not involve herself in politics. She may believe this to be the best way to protect her brother's life, both politically and physically. Corwitz could not be as affectionate toward her brother as he was toward Anna-Rose. From their first meeting, Reinhard von Musel had regarded him as if he were part of a kidnapper's gang, and Corwitz did not change his reserved attitude. Although Corvitz found him unappealing, he was overwhelmed by Reinhardt's intense and sharp beauty. When stared at directly with Reinhardt's ice-blue eyes, Corvitz sometimes wondered if he was sharing a seat with an extraordinary individual. Unfortunately for Corvitz and, to some extent, a minimal consolation for Reinhardt, Anna Rose did not conceive a child with Frederick IV. Whether this will lead to good or ill fortune for her in the future remains unknown to anyone.